serious. Okay, well, I'm missing the document.
Thank you for holding up the compact. So thanks so much. Clearly. Good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Yes, of
We've
course.
met
Yeah,
a few
for many times. Yeah,
Many times.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice to see you. Thank you.
Great to see a good turnout on every.
Yes, it is. And there's online, of course, also people join. Is the microphone working? Yes. Okay, good morning, people. Good morning, fabulous people. Good morning, happy people. Good morning, UN General Assembly Week people. Welcome. Welcome to this session. I need to ensure that I'm always speaking directly into the microphone, and I've been reminded of this, so I'm already passing on this reminder to others who have microphones, because it's us here in the room. We made it through the rain, through the traffic, to UN Women. Looking forward to this important session. But there's also many people online, and while we might understand each other without microphone, it's not possible for those that are part of the session online. So we need to pay attention, saying it again, just because I'm not really that technically versed, speak directly into the microphone. So we are here in a collaboration between UN Women. Thank you for the premises that we can use and the expertise we can tap into. UN Women, then the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, a very important organization about which we will learn more in the course of this morning about the great work that you're doing, and Women Political Leaders, which is the global network of women in political office. I'm Silvana Koch-Merin. I used to be a politician, and now I'm the president and founder of Women Political Leaders, and I have the honor and pleasure of moderating, chairing this session. So what are we going to do? We will have a discussion between experts and expert politicians on the topic of the Parliamentary-Civil Society Alliance Propelling Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security to New Heights. If we look into the world right now, we see that conflicts are ravaging in many places of the world. The most affected in those conflicts are women, is youth, and the ones that are the most excluded from preventing conflict, from finding peace, from building lasting peace are exactly those groups. And there's a united ambition of everybody here in the room and online, I'm convinced, to change that. And these are the new heights that we want to achieve. And by this, we need collective action, we need collaboration, we need to work together, because single voices alone, they can be very strong and powerful, but what's unstoppable is collective action. When we all get together behind the same goal and work on it from very different directions. So we want to raise awareness among those that have a voice, but also bring more people on board for this kind of collective action. And we want to explore ways on how to implement the ideas, the goodwill, but maybe also the political decisions that are eventually taken. How do we turn that into reality? And we've got a phenomenal list of speakers here, and we have a phenomenal group of people in the room and online. And without further ado, I pass on for opening remarks to Sarah Hendricks, who is the Acting Assistant Secretary General of UN Women. Sarah, please.
Thank you so much. I will speak right into the mic as you've guided. It's fantastic to be here today and to see such a full room of dedicated champions in this important space. And welcome also to the many, many who are online as well. I'm bringing a note of welcome from UN Women, but here we are gathered both as friends, as colleagues. Many of you are honorable members of Parliament. You are distinguished guests and excellencies. It really is my honor to welcome you to UN Women and to today's very important discussion. Here in New York, it is a rainy day. And so many of you have fought through traffic and along a busy subway system to get here. And we are appreciative because this is such a critical and catalytic conversation. It is a conversation on the role of parliaments in implementing the women, peace, and security agenda. And certainly, as Silvana has mentioned, we all know very concretely that the world is facing so many unprecedented and intersecting crises and challenges. And within that, we all know that we must harness the very full potential of women and girls. And it is that building alliances across generations, building alliances with women's groups, with networks, and also, especially and importantly, with parliamentarians, that is critical to attaining the change that we collectively seek for and with women and girls. Parliamentarians, those of you who are in the room or online, you have such an important role to play. You have a role to play in leading on breaking the silence on violence against women in politics, on sensitizing your constituents, and also on sensitizing your fellow legislators, and on advocating for solutions and appropriate legislative responses that will make real and living as well as sustainable impact. Other actions that you can take as parliamentarians are to facilitate peaceful elections. And within that, to mitigate violence against women that may include actions such as mapping or measuring violence, integrating aspects of violence against women in elections and into elections observation and violence monitoring, ensuring that this is a topic in electoral arrangements, as well as working with political parties on prevention, including the ways in which technology facilitated violence has become such an important aspect on affecting women in politics, and raising awareness on changing harmful social norms. I hope everyone is keeping count on how many national action plans have been adopted around the world, but it is a significant number. It is now 107 national action plans on 1325 that have been adopted. And we are starting to see across those 107 contexts increasing discussion on the role of parliamentarians in accelerating the women, peace, and security agenda. And this is excellent. I attended the Women, Peace, Security Focal Points Network meeting in June of this year. It was hosted in Washington, D.C. by the co-hosts US and Romania this year. And the focal points discussed considering legislation where appropriate to advance the agenda. I directly had many conversations with parliamentarians in the room. And in fact, we heard also about some interesting and impressive precedent-setting legislation. The US has taken the step to adopt a Women, Peace, Security Act. This is the first of its kind to actually enshrine 1325 National Action Plan into law itself. The role of parliamentary committees in budgeting and also in budgetary oversight is another crucial area to ensure adequate allocation of funds to women, peace, security, to the implementation of national action plans. So as we jump into today's, what I hope and know will be dynamic discussion, we're eager to hear from you, but also engage in a discussion and to call on you as legislators who know how to make policy that can be forced, policy that can lead to change. Whether this is through your oversight of relevant government departments that actually work on international peace and security, whether it's through your role on laws related to women, peace, and security, or whether it's through your role to introduce women, peace, and security into other relevant legislation. These are all tremendous steps, and we're eager to bring those to the forefront today. I think without these actions, otherwise, the radical change in the direction we want to see will indeed not materialize. So thank you all for your commitment. We are wishing you, and I directly am wishing you the very best in our discussions today, and particularly as you return to your legislatures to carry forward this essential work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for really the untirable work of UN Women and yourself in that area, because I mean, you have so many years of experience in that specific field, but you're going strong with full of energy, and thank you very much for your words and for what you do. Moving on to the next opening remarks of the founder and CEO of GNWP, and Maria Cabrera Balleca, sorry, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Silvana. Good morning, everyone. Oh,
right to you.
okay. Good morning. Okay. Hello, friends online. I hope you hear me now. Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm just checking if we need more coffee. My name is Mavic Cabrera Balleca. I know it's not easy to pronounce, but Mavic is short for Maria Victoria. Some people find that easier to remember. My assignment for today is to walk you through the objectives of this panel discussion. But before doing that, I would like to share, our experience or that served as impetus for this panel, but also our ongoing work with women political leaders. So in 2018, we were in the Democratic Republic of Congo to hold a series of localization of the National Action Plan workshop. And in the localization workshop, where we bring the women, peace, and security agenda, particularly the National Action Plan, if there is a National Action Plan in that country, and there is in DRC, to break it down, translate it in ways that speak to the realities in local communities. And in such convening, we have all leaders, all sectors represented, including women political leaders. So they were approaching an elections that year, and actually the first, I believe, at the local governance level. So it was very important, the first after the series of peace processes. So there were about 10 women who are already occupying positions, and some who are entering politics for the first time. So it was a good mix. And they shared with us their motivation for entering politics. And it was so inspiring. They represented different parties. But equally, if not more importantly, they shared their challenges, where they were hoping organizations like the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders and all the other participants would be able to support them. What are those challenges? And these are some of what they have shared. First of all, the lack of party support and exclusion from decision-making party structures, even if they already belong in that political party. They are at the lowest level of the hierarchy in the political parties. Second is lack of campaign funds. That was very evident. Women always do not have access and control of financial resources. The other challenge that they were facing was lack of media coverage. And if there is media coverage, it's gender-based, it's stereotyping, traditional negative roles of women, and questioning why are they even thinking of entering politics. And one of the things that we were able to respond to right away is to convene media organizations in the DRC and have a group interview or one-on-one interview with the women political candidates. So this initiative continued in Kenya, where last year we also did the same as Kenya was then approaching elections. And it was a mix of candidates for the national and local level parliament. And we're happy to say that at least one out of the 7 women we gathered won her seat in the national parliament. So I hope we contributed somehow to her securing that seat by getting her, arranging meetings with the media. So now we are here, and Sarah has already mentioned how collaboration with parliamentarians is central to the work on women, peace, and security, including through the Women Peace and Security Focal Points Network. And those conversations are continuing, and this panel is building onto that. So the specific objectives for this morning are: 1, to foster collaboration between parliamentarians, gender equality advocates, and civil society in advancing the women, peace, and security agenda in synergy with the youth, peace, and security resolutions. I should mention that among the women political leaders that we meet, there are always youth representatives, young women who want to enter into politics, because as we all know, there's a strong evidence that as more women are elected or appointed to office, there is a corresponding increase in policy making and policy implementation that reflects the priority of women and families. And then second objective is to raise awareness and increasing commitment among parliamentarians on their critical role in advancing the women, peace, and security and youth, peace, and security resolutions. And last, the third, is to explore ways to enhance the implementation of comprehensive and holistic policies, including national action plans. They need to be translated from paper into transformative action, as well as monitoring and accountability mechanisms related to their implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mavic. And now, without any further delay, we move into the panel discussion. We have 3 members of parliament from different parts of the world joining us, and 1 civil society representative. And after that initial panel discussion, we will bring in a few experts from the audience here, and also have time for question and answers. So let me start with Mary Lou McFadden, who is a senator from Canada, an independent senator, and a very, very vocal advocate for both collaboration and specifically on peace and security matters. Please, Mary Louise.
Thank you so much, Silvana, and to everyone on the panel, the Sarahs from UN Women. And Baby and I had this conversation, we think over 2 years ago, that this would be a good idea. So it's wonderful to see it actually happen, and thank you for hosting it, UN Women. As has been mentioned, I'm with the Parliament of Canada. I'm an independent senator, and I want to acknowledge this morning that the Parliament of Canada is situated on the unceded, unsurrendered lands of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples. And also that I come from Manitoba, which is Treaty 1 territory, and it is also the homeland of the Métis Nation in Canada. I want to also acknowledge that I work in a place that has gender parity, the Senate of Canada. We are only the second Senate in the world to achieve gender parity, and we achieved it very recently. And I will add to that as a point for us to think about the reality for parliamentarians. And that is, just because we achieve gender parity doesn't mean that that instantly changes the patriarchal institutions that we have to navigate in actually bringing in laws and policies that will make the kind of changes that we're here to talk about today. I will note that at various points along the way in my 6+ years as a senator, I have been surprised at the number of times that my women colleagues have seemed rather fond of our patriarchal ways. And it's not a simple gender matter. It has a great deal to do with the alliances and the relationships built on common values. And that really is, I think, at the heart of Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. We have very important value statements. We also have 23 years ago, the very first Security Council resolution that was drafted primarily by women and with huge influence from women in the South. And I think you can see that not only in the resolution itself, but in the whole cluster of subsequent resolutions that have been needed in order to really make the details of what does it take to implement women, peace, and security. I was very honored to be invited by Patty Torsney of IPU, whom we'll hear from shortly, to participate in the SDG Activism Weekend, and spoke on one of the panels, and I'll make a couple of the points today that I made there. One is, yes, absolutely, 100+ national action plans. Let's celebrate that. But let's also really dig down on the practical realities of implementation. And this is something that parliamentarians have to grapple with all the time, because so many people who aren't deeply familiar with the parliamentary process will think, oh, you passed a new law. Great. It's only the beginning. We always have to be trying to see the matchup of resources, the matchup of the kind of staff with the kind of commitment that you need to actually move from words on a document to action on the ground. And when I say on the ground, I mean on the front lines. And for the most part, when parliamentarians go home to their communities, that's our front line. That's when we're able to engage. And that's, I would say, the parliamentarians that I know around the world that are committed to the women, peace, and security agenda, committed to the youth, peace, and security agenda, and committed to the cluster of Security Council resolutions affecting for children affected by conflict. They really are. They really do fit together in terms of what happens in real lives on front lines, particularly where people are living in any kind of a conflict zone. And what we have to then realize is that we need local action plans that are a big part of the national action plan. And that needs to be seen by us as parliamentarians as part of our job. We go home and we find ways to bring about actual relationship building, allocation of resources that are needed, and the kind of collaborations that need to happen. One of my specific recommendations, and this comes from a learning of my own, is that parliamentarians need, when we go home, we need to engage our diaspora communities. There's tremendous knowledge there, and information flows much more quickly from the diaspora back to the country in question and vice versa. And for the most part, again, an observation only, is I think many of our folks that are staffing our foreign affairs, our international relations, don't see it that way. Don't see diaspora communities as trustworthy or as really strong resources. And I hope that more parliamentarians and civil society can work together to change that. Bottom line for parliamentarians, our job is to make law. And it usually takes a really long time. And it usually gets watered down. And it always has unintended consequences, always. So what women parliamentarians and parliamentarians that are committed to WPS and YPS really have to keep in mind is not only the passing of laws, but the whole range of policies and possibilities, including meetings like this, where we can be building the kind of collaboration that it takes. This is a very strong point that Silvana's made, and it's absolutely true. For those of you that aren't familiar with the research on this, in the area of violence against women, for example, we've got extensive longitudinal research published in very credible journals that demonstrate that the single most effective investment, doesn't have to be the only investment, the single most effective investment in countering violence against women is investing on the ground in local civil society, women-led organizations. Last quick point I want to make is about young people and the YPS. And that is, for those of you who are at the SDG weekend or have been following a bit of the X commentary afterwards, it was bizarre to sit in committee room 1 and see this articulate young woman speaking from the podium, and in front of her, it wasn't this, it was young person. What is that? I mean, that's the kind of, I think, unconscious, I'm not saying there was any malice in that whatsoever, but that kind of erasure of young people and the individuality and the dynamism we need, we really have to work harder on that one in terms of engaging young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for these really, really strong points, and also taking us into the reality of what does the work of a parliamentarian really mean? Because those who have not held a mandate themselves or have worked very closely with parliamentarians might not actually know the many, many, many different engagements that parliamentarians have in their local communities, because in the end, all politics is local. That's where you get elected. That's where you get re-elected. And everything that you do nationally or internationally needs to relate to your communities and in your constituencies. And thank you for also for taking us on that journey. So I'm turning to the first virtual speaker, and I hope she is there. Is she there? So it's the Honourable Member of Parliament from of the National Assembly of Kenya, Umulka Harun. Are you online? Because I don't. Ah, there you go. Wonderful. You have the floor, please.
Thank you so much. It's interesting just following the conversations all the way from Kenya. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join, but I am with you in spirit and virtually. I hope I'm clear. I hope my internet is not acting up so that I'm not interrupted. Just listening to the room and the amount of work that we are all doing in our different spaces on matters, women, peace, security, and, you know, youth, peace, security. Like you said, most of the young parliamentarians who are women also happen to be youth. I represent the youth in the National Assembly of Kenya. Slightly in office for a year now. And one of the first agendas I picked up when I came into office was to at least create the path for having the youth action plan for YPS, because in Kenya, we've done a bit of work in women, peace, security, but I'll say a bit of work because it hasn't gone as far. Unfortunately, with our policies, most of it is affected by the elections that happen after every 5 years. So the previous government had a minister for gender who was a woman, and she picked up the WPS as a passion project. And I would say passion project because she was really pushing for it through and through. But unfortunately, their government had finished their term, and little effort actually had been done in that period of time with the members of parliament. Most of the agenda was being pushed, especially by the executive. So it looked like a ministry project more than a project that engages across board. So picking the lessons from that, then the first things I did was push the agenda on YPS and borrowing leaf from what has been done in WPS. And we immediately I brought this, I sat down with the ministry, particularly the youth minister, and also the civil societies, because that was also something I noticed we had not picked in the Women, Peace, Security agenda. So in Kenya, we actually have a Kenyan Coalition for Youth, Peace, Security, and we are comprised of at least 300 civil society organizations. So the idea here is to at least include the voices of young people in the process. So we will actually be working hand in hand with women peace security issues. And we are now domiciled in the Ministry of Youth, and myself as a member, we have at least 60 young members of parliament in Kenya, young being relative in this particular meaning, at least 45 and below. So if you're 45 and below, then you are young in Kenya. But that's not what our constitution says. We just expanded the space so that we can at least have as many members to push the narrative of women issues and youth issues when it comes to peace security. So that's where we are now. And I am part of the steering committee for youth peace security. And honestly, I would say it's been an eye-opener and an experience for me. In fact, as much as I've been working on matters, peace issues, and as a grassroots leader, even before I transitioned into politics, but now that I'm in the space as a politician, then the dynamics are a bit different, because you get to at least engage with the grassroots, engage with the executive, engage with the members of parliament, so that at least at the end of the day, we come up with a document that, you know, is very holistic and touches on all these areas. And for me, both women in peace and youth in peace is, you know, a very crucial matter, because in 2015, I come from Garissa County, which is part of the Northern County. We only had one university, and we had the terror attack that happened at Garissa University, and we lost about 147 lives. And every day we keep losing lives to IEDs, and you know, our military and our police officers are always dying in the line of duty. So part of the agenda, and that's where localizing WPS and YPS comes in, part of the agenda is to also offer protection for the women and the youth who are working in this space. And I say this because myself, now I'm a member of parliament, at least I have some sort of immunity, but when you're a civil society or a grassroots advocate, and you cannot even see one of these, you know, terms out in public, because you never know who's in the room and who might target you. So whenever we are working in the spaces of peace security, they're radicalizing young people, supporting women, you know, discussing the issue of radicalization, you know, the way it is, then we have to use euphemisms or words that do not at least rub off a certain sect of people, because we know they exist within us in our communities. And we then have to also incorporate this in the action plan that we are doing. How exactly can we protect the young women, the young people who are working in these spaces? So for me as a parliamentarian, it goes beyond a policy document. It goes beyond, you know, having a beautiful agenda of saying, you know, we are working in peace security. For me, it's something that I'm really, really passionate about and keen on to, because I've lost family to these kinds of conflict, and I've lost friends in the process as well. So I'm hoping this will be that particular guiding tool that Kenya will be able to use to support young people and women in the peace security space. In Kenya, at least we have support from the Finnish embassy, and we also have the Rotary on board, but we are also looking to have as many partners, because security is a very crucial area If you look at what's happening in the Northern Corridor, especially Lamu, as of last week, we lost officers, we lost workmen who are just doing their job. So this is something we deal with every day, and hopefully we are able to at least, come together to work as a country and as women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Omulka, for sharing. Is the microphone on? For sharing with us the example of Kenya and the really, really crucial work that you're doing. Also, thank you for being so open with us and sharing your personal experiences and the moments of really of fear when you're civil society representative, but also becoming a politician, because it's not just that you are one. It's a tough way to get there, and especially full of risks for women often when it comes to violence against women who go on a public leadership path and with an agenda that is not necessary to everybody's liking. So thank you very much for sharing with us your insights and being available for this meeting. So now we move on to yet another virtual speaker and another member of parliament who is very experienced in the issues of women, peace and security. And it's Honorable Betty Ogwaru from South Sudan, who I believe, I can see her online. I'm very honored to have you contributing to this discussion. And the specific question maybe that we haven't addressed yet is how actually can parliamentarians, civil society, and those international organizations, multilateral institutions like different UN agencies or others work together to create this collective action? So is there examples in your own country from your experience where you could give us some insights? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning to New York. Good afternoon. I got caught up, so I couldn't reach New York in time, but I'm pleased that I can still join you through the Zoom. I would say protocol observed for everybody who is in the room. As Senator Mary Lou said, 2 years ago, we were talking about how can parliamentarians work together with the civil society and move the agenda of women, peace and security forward. This particular event today is very important to me because I have at heart the women, peace and security, and I've been advocating for it for a very, very long time. Even before the peace agreement of South Sudan and Sudan was signed in 2005, I was already campaigning for the protection of women, prevention of conflict, participation of women, all this for peace. So when it was signed in 2000, and I was telling the women of South Sudan that the UN actually listened to us. So today, it is time really we should now look back, how much have we done and how much do we still need to do? Indeed, parliamentarians have very important and must have effective role in not only raising awareness on women, peace and security, but also in enforcing the implementation of the same. Because as Senator Mary Lou said, the parliamentarians are to make law, but if you make a law that is not implemented, then your law is as good as nothing. The women parliamentarians of South Sudan have had several cooperations with the civil societies advocating for women, peace and security. There have been engagements through the South Sudanese Women Parliamentary Caucus, which I created in 2006, and I'm very happy that it is really moving the women agenda at the moment very well, and collaborating with the different entities, with the UN Women, particularly in South Sudan, and UNDP, and the civil societies to disseminate the UN Security Council resolution, because people hear about it, but they don't know about it. So it is not only to disseminate it in the town where the many land people are. The Women Parliamentary Caucus with the UN Women decided that with the civil society, this should be taken also to the women at the grassroots so that they know their rights, they know how to fight for their rights, and they also should help to disseminate the women peace and security. In South Sudan, of course, we have many instruments that we can use to disseminate women peace and security. One, the revitalized peace agreement actually gives women 35% of rights to participate in decision-making with men. Although we are still fighting to see that the 35% is across board, it has been achieved in the parliament. It has been achieved partially in the executive, but in the other sectors has not been achieved. So the women are still fighting for it to be achieved. And there are other instruments that women are using, the UN Security Council 1325, the African Union, gender equality, the East Africa. There are so many instruments, but even when the government of South Sudan signs to these instruments, the goodwill to see it happening and to fund it happening is not happening. So still women are fighting to see that the government should have a goodwill, not just to sign instruments, but to sign and get committed to these instruments. So the political will to move these documents is still in the parliament. The women are struggling to see to it that the government really can move it. Many women, female MPs, use the chance actually for this collaboration between the UN women, the civil society, when they go to the ground to disseminate the women peace and security agenda, the peace agreement, the roadmap to peace agreement. When they go to disseminate this, they use it also as a means to connect with their constituencies and engage the communities and the local stakeholders to build their understanding of the most important thing for us is the National Action Plan, which women participated in building with the Ministry of Gender. However, this National Action Plan is still not being implemented because there's no funding that is attached to it. I must also say that we have been urging the Minister of Gender to present it to the Parliament. Although she launched it broadly, it has not been presented to the Parliament. So the Parliament have not passed a budget attached to the National Action Plan. So it becomes very difficult for this to be implemented. Although the various development agencies, I mean the various ministries which are in the National Action Plans, they take the little bit of their pieces, they budgeted for it, and they try to implement it. On many occasions, the implementation is very low, and there's nobody that really monitors the different ministries, either whether they have implemented the National Action Plan or not. But the dissemination also helped parliamentarians to encourage the local community to identify specific or local challenges that affect them, so that the national government, actually from the state legislative assembly to the national legislative assembly, to take it up. Women in the parliament have taken up several of these challenges which are raised to them. One of the major challenges where the women of South Sudan are facing in terms of women and security is the cattle rustling, which is a continuous. It started as a traditional thing, but it's now becoming a major conflict issue. And it affects women and children because when young boys go to cattle rustle, the women who are left behind are affected. They are moved, they run randomly, they leave all their things, and they are suffering. But along the way, there's another event also that we are very concerned with, is the abduction of children. There are communities that go abducting children of other communities. And this is also now an event that women are really suffering from it, because you lose your child, you don't know who have abducted the child, and it becomes a big problem. It is difficult to trace them in this jungle of South Sudan. So we face this problem a lot. But the work of the parliamentarians in the community also help them to promote the roles of women and girls. Now, women and girls in the community have understood that early marriages should not be accepted. and parents cannot force them into early marriages, is all because the women went out there to disseminate the rights of the girl child. So at least now early marriages have been reduced because of this dissemination of and then contact and collaboration with women in civil society and women in the parliament. The majority of youth have now also come on board to help in the dissemination, because most of the youth are the ones affected. Like the youth who go and cattle rustle, it is not the older people, it is the youth. And the youth that are left and drop out of school, and then in the end you find that the illiteracy rate is not improving, it's getting worse. So with continuous awareness raising and continuous joint committee between the Women Caucus and the civil society, the youth have begun to understand that it is important to go to school, it is important to stop this conflict going in, and it is important to have peace so that they can develop. The Specialized Committee on Gender and Child Welfare in the Parliament is another branch that is also working so hard with the civil society to advocate for the government's implementation on women, peace and security. And we also have the Specialized Committee on Security in the Parliament, which also works together with the Women Parliamentary Caucus. In case there is a conflict in an area, they move quickly to go and see what is happening. But these committees in the parliament are always having problem of quick action because of lack of funding. So often they go to an area after a period of time and after so many things have gone wrong. So funding is another very important thing that can help the parliamentarians move. The civil society sometimes pick one or two members of parliaments to go with them, because they also complain they don't have the funding. So funding becomes also an important factor in moving the work of women parliamentarians into the society. On gender-based violence, as I said, there are many instruments that the government have signed to, but now, because of the lack of political will, the women in the parliament are pushing it through the speaker in the parliament that the government have to commit itself into all these instruments that it have signed, so that we don't want to see any more gender-based violence. So the government have now given its word of no tolerance to gender-based violence. And I can give you an example of just recently on the 15th of September, which is a few days ago, the mayor of Juba City went on his inspection, on his duty, and yet he had asked people not to vendor on the street. But most of these vendors on the street are women, because they need to put food on the table. Women are the ones now putting food on the table, and they use all available ways to sell items so that they can put food on the table. So this mayor, instead of warning a one-woman street vendor, he just slapped the woman in front of the camera. And of course, all the women jointly came out to campaign against this mayor, and they have asked the government of Central Equatoria to relieve him immediately and also punish him. And we are pleased that the governor of Central Equatoria listened to the women. In the parliament, the women said if this mayor is not relieved, then the governor of Central Equatoria also has to be relieved, because it means he is also part and parcel of the gender-based violence.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for. Unfortunately, we have to come to a close. We have more speakers, but thank you so very much, Honorable Betiogo, for sharing the very many different layers of the issue with us, and also ending on such an uplifting note to show that things are changing and that political action and civil action can go hand in hand and make real change. Thank you very, very much for your contribution. Thank you. We now move to our last speaker and move continent for this. And we go to Pakistan, where Hira Amjad, who is a Cora Vice Peacebuilding Fellow, will join us. And And I think the question to you, being not a member of parliament, but being somebody who works as an expert on these issues with parliamentarians and others, really is, what kind of policy changes are you hoping to see, and are you like seeing in reach in the work that you're doing? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone from Pakistan, and good morning where you are. And I hope you're all having a pleasant day, and I'm audible to all of you. Okay, wonderful. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be sharing this panel with so many distinguished women with a lot of experience from different parts of the world. And as I come from Pakistan, and as I evaluate the experience that I've had of working for almost 10 years, in Pakistan on sexual and gender-based violence prevention, on sexual and reproductive health rights, I would like to share my 2 cents on the subject. But before that, a little bit preliminary overview of the work that I do here in Pakistan. So basically, I run my own organization, which is called Dastak Women Rights and Awareness Foundation, that has been proactively working on the sexual and gender-based violence prevention agenda in Pakistan. And slowly and gradually, over the course of last few years, we have worked in emergencies, conflicts, and crises with women directly in order to better understand their needs and challenges that they face. And we try to work with parliamentarians directly in order to mainstream their experiences in the national agenda and policy making through initiatives such as forming alliances, networks, and launching different fellowship programs and peace-building initiatives in Pakistan. So over the course of last 10 years, we have encountered various challenges while working directly with parliamentarians and civil society organization leaders in the country and at regional level as well. So one of the core things that I would really like to stress here is, and before moving on to the policy arena, is that there is a strong need to work towards capacity building of parliamentarians on women, peace and security agenda and youth peace and security agenda, not just in Pakistan, but at regional level as well. In Pakistan, we currently do not have a women action plan focused on, a national action plan focused on women, peace and security. But very recently, the government launched a national action plan on gender sensitive responding towards climate crises. But even that action plan had a lot of information, had a lot of essential things missing, because women are rarely ever made part of the conversation, and parliamentarians who are sitting in spaces where decisions are being made do not have enough knowledge, technical knowledge and experience vis-a-vis women, peace and security agenda. So there is a very strong need from my or our personal social cultural context is to work on their capacity building so that more legislation which is gender responsive as a result of these collaborations can be made, which is in the interest and needs of young women who are residing within conflict areas. Another very quick example that I would like to share from my context is that this year Pakistan was hit massively by flooding, which led to mass flooding and displacement of women and young girls and children, and that led to a lot of local conflict within the communities as well. But in the action plan, there was no gendered perspective in order to take into account the needs of these women. So I believe that if there is strong correlation and collaboration between civil society and parliamentarians, particularly civil society leaders who are working at grassroots level, like knowledge sharing symposium, knowledge sharing seminars, and collaborative learning workshops and platforms where we can connect and share with each other, like what we have been learning from the grassroots level and how it can be adopted within different policies. So bridging this gap between parliamentarians and civil society leaders, I think, is of utmost importance at this point in time. Take with an intersectional perspective as well, like whether we talk about the climate crises, whether we talk about the immigration issues, whether we talk about the displacement as well. So civil society is working at the grassroots level, and outcomes and policies need to take into account our experiences and things that we are seeing, we are working on at the grassroots level. And that is something that can lead to evidence-driven representation of indigenous communities, indigenous women, rural communities, and their needs. And that can be integrated into the women action plans or women, peace and security national action plans at national, regional, and global level. Another very important thing that I really want to stress here, and another honorable panelist has also stressed on that, is that it's very easy to develop action plan. It's not easy, obviously. It requires a lot of hard work, but that is just the first step. What is next? Where does the implementation come in? And that's where also civil society has a very, very important role, because civil society can be the eyes and the ears of the parliamentarians as well as the government, because we are working at the indigenous level. We are working with the communities. We are directly interacting with the women. So this back and forth communication, this collaboration is something that can make our work more indigenous, more grassroots, that can help us make the voices of women mainstream. Like me sitting here talking from Pakistan, sharing my experience with all of you of working in the field for 10 years is definitely the first step that women in Pakistan actually need in order to make their experiences, make their challenges and voices heard at the global and regional level. So I strongly believe that definitely we need to have more legislation. Definitely we need to have more policies that are inclusive and gender sensitive and focus more on the women who are residing within the conflict regions. But simultaneously, collaboration with civil society is essential for effective implementation of these action plans and making sure that those adaptations are inclusive and sustainable. Another very important point that I really want to stress here is that, and I can't, it's very easy to sit and say that women need to be in places where decisions are being made. But in a country where I come from, in a country like Pakistan, where the parliament is heavily male dominated, we still have a long way to go in order to ensuring that the voices of women are mainstreamed, are heard, and are in places where policies are being made, where decisions are being taken, where they are given access to platforms to talk about their needs and their challenges. And I think the collaboration can be essential and crucial in ensuring that the civil society stands with parliamentarians in implementation of women, peace and security. And last thing that I really want to stress here is that the funding is of critical importance. Like the funding needs to be attached with the implementation. There is a clear gap in terms of development of these plans and the budgetary mechanisms, and then the accountability framework that comes along with it, that how we are holding governments and the people who are at the helm of affairs accountable vis-a-vis implementation of these action plans. And on a parting note, I would just like to stress here that the role of civil society.
I'm very sorry, but we have a lot of questions and other interventions, and thank you so very much for sharing your experience, but also the role of civil society and as eyes and ears, and being the ones with the ambition and the pushing for funding, pushing and observing accountability. So thank you very much for sharing this. And now we have some interventions from the floor, and I just invite up here to come join us up here. I think one third person still missing. There you, there, wonderful. And so we have first interventions from the floor here, women with outstanding experience on the matter. And so I'd like to invite Vandana Rana, who's the vice chair, sorry, of the CEDAW committee in Nepal. And please give us your view.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Honorable parliamentarians and all those who are in this room, as well as those joining online. I'm not a parliamentarian, but I have worked very closely with parliamentarians to bring about transformative change in relation to women, peace, and security in Nepal, and now also globally through the CEDAW committee. I just want to share some example from Nepal. I come from Nepal, and Nepal is a country that has emerged from conflict. And I recall, I have had very close association. I continue to do with GNWP, and with the knowledge, in association with GNWP. It was in the early stages when we ended a conflict. And 2007, we had a new Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction. Before that, all women's issues was centered on women ministry, which does not get the priority in the national development. But with a shift with the Ministry of Peace and Reconstruction, there was some importance given to women, peace and security issues. But fortunately for us, coming to women parliamentarians, we had a first woman foreign minister. She passed away now, Sahana Pradhan. And it was because she had close relation with activism, civil society, that she was responsive enough when we requested to organize a high-level consultation where for the first time we had the security sector, all stakeholders to orient, and I was the resource person to orient on women, peace and security. So it was this very first consultation after conflict. And I recall after that half-day consultation, the next day when I opened, the FM radios are very popular in Nepal, the community radios, I could hear this minister talk about this 1325, which she had never talked about before. And it was so exciting to hear when she was interviewed to say how important 1325, when we look at global policies, how it impacts the national policies and how you need to bring in the national experiences to the global level to influence global policies. So it was this lady, who was talking about that. And that actually helped us to build this collaboration with women parliamentarians to develop, that propelled to develop a national action plan in Nepal. We were the 24th country, I think, to develop a national action plan in 2010. And it was a very, very close collaboration with the civil society, the government, and the legislators, particularly women parliamentarians. And we, with the help of GNWP, we also developed a localization guideline. And we worked with the government to develop this localization guideline to integrate into the local plans. However, it's very common in our parts of Asia to have change of bureaucrats very frequently. And you work with one bureaucrat who you convince. And just at the point when we were about to finalize a localization guideline, the officer changed. And the new one refused to understand what a localization guideline. And at that point, I do recall now, it was the women parliamentarians, because we had engaged them in the procedure of developing this national action plan, who actually directed the bureaucrats to say that this is a part of a very important localization guideline. So what I'm trying to say is that women parliamentarians and few male allies within the parliament, you need to work with them as well, can play a very, very important role in integrating women, peace and security agenda in the local plans, in the provincial plans, in the federal plans. We had a special trust fund called the Nepal Peace Trust Fund, which was not at all gender responsive. So the oversight budgetary role of the women parliamentarians helped us to bring in that gender responsiveness into this national budget as well. Coming to 2 points very shortly. One, about my role in the CEDAW committee. And I think CEDAW mechanism is extremely important, particularly now with the General Recommendation 30. We may have a national action plan, but there's no accountability mechanism. So it is through the General Recommendation 30 within the CEDAW committee to make governments accountable to integrate WPS as well as YPS now, particularly with girls, because at the moment we are drafting a General Recommendation 40 on women's meaningful participation, particularly women parliamentarians. So women parliamentarians or all parliamentarians need to engage with CEDAW mechanisms, which actually enhances the accountability of governments for WPS as well as YPS. And last point is, we are in the turning point of two major global events. One, the ICPD 30 and the Beijing, following that, the Beijing 30. These are very important cornerstones, I think, where parliamentarians need to engage. Because we are having, when you talk about WPS, the women and young girls that have been conflict victims have no access to services, provisions, rights. So parliamentarians need to engage in these mechanisms where there are now having national consultations, regional consultations that will build to the global policies. And we in Nepal, just in the process, I've come straight from there also, we are holding consultations with parliamentarians at the local level, at the national level, at the federal level, to see how they can integrate these processes into their local plans and increase budget. So thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you also for adding yet another aspect of the role of parliamentarians in this work into the discussion, meaning that when administrations change or rotation is happening, that parliamentarians can have the political continuity for making it a priority. And again, and on the aspect of accountability, also highlighting that. And sometimes there's also, we hear maybe from IPU as well later, the role of parliamentarians can be holding the government accountable, civil society holding parliamentarians accountable, but then parliamentarians holding the government accountable is also an important role. And thank you very much for highlighting that. Over to our next speaker, Linda Robinson, who is a senior fellow with the Council on Foreign Relations and specialist on women and foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the chance to participate and make a few comments to amplify the good comments that have already been made and bring a few other points into the conversation. I first would like to congratulate Canada on achieving the parity in your Senate. That's important. And I do think, Senator, your point was well taken that numbers are just the beginning. You need to have action and policies. And of course, we're talking a lot here about how to actually implement laws and plans once they're actually crafted. And I think that is where this synergy that is the theme of today's talk between civil society and government can actually propel the action that is so critically needed, because we do have, as pointed out, 107 national action plans for WPS. And while there are some successes, I would say it's critical to energize the implementation. And with the YPS engagement, I just have a first two comments that I think could really help bring in youth. I'm discouraged by my own research showing many young women do not want to enter the formal political arena. And I do think that technology-facilitated gender-based violence is a really critical new problem, very potent issue that we must get after. But given that there is a certain attraction to the civil society activism, I would recommend we take hold of that while also advocating young women come into politics. And I think one way to do that is to really amplify within the plans the climate issue. Only 17 of the 107 plans actually have specific climate-related provisions. So I think as these plans are revised, adding climate and putting meat on the bones is important. The other way, since many women are involved in civil society activities to gain more participation, is to have them explicitly given roles within these national action plans to craft the plans, to monitor the plans, and help implement them, including participating in peacekeeping missions and in observer capacities. We also in the US government, this administration is trying to directly attribute funding that will ramp up local civil society organizations and women NGOs in particular. So I think that we need to make sure government budgeting, when it occurs, includes those kinds of specific hooks. We've already heard many comments about the budget problems. So we can have nice laws and nice plans on, but if there are no resources, they don't get implemented. I'd like to highlight that currently the Biden administration is undertaking a massive exercise to attribute its gender-based funding. So there will be public commitments that we can hold their feet to the fire. There's also the Global Fragility Act, which has an explicit requirement in law that gender-based issues are addressed, that gender equality is part of that global fragility plan. Another critical implementation and accountability measure is the use of sanctions. And for the first time this summer, the U.S. administration issued sanctions for actors in the Sudanese conflict that are alleged to have committed conflict-related sexual violence crimes. So I think this is also something we can shine a light on, and in the activist community seek to ramp up accountability measures. The other conditionality measure I would like to highlight is we have very few women involved in peace processes, and we're looking forward, hopefully, to peace negotiations eventually and a peace process for many of the conflicts around the world. It would be important for governments, as they're giving foreign assistance to those countries, to require in writing, in the budgeting, that women be seated at the peace process. I think that without that kind of directive authority tied to funding, it's just not going to happen. And then my final suggestion for ramping up the implementation and the visibility of these plans is to require that governments, departments, and ministries have their gender advisor not buried down in the bowels of the bureaucracy, but as a direct report to the ministers. And so they get the visibility and the attention to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you. A lot of very, very concrete ideas for action that would help massively advance the agenda. Thank you very much for that. We have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions or remarks. And maybe there's 1, 2. So I just wonder if we should maybe we take those 3. And then if you wouldn't mind briefly introducing yourself, and in case your question is directed at one specific person, also say to whom this question would go. Please, I think I saw you first, and then those over there.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Raja Tali. I'm from Syria, representing Center for Civil Society and Democracy. And I'm also a member of the Women Advisory Board. And thank you so much for highlighting the issue of inclusion of women in the parliament. But also I want to highlight, since we are in the constitutional process in Syria, I hope also, since it's legalized mechanism, to highlight also women inclusion in writing constitution around the world, because this is like affect actually the elections system, like with the parliament or others. So to start with there, and not only having increased the women participation in the parliament, in the writing the constitution, but also how to make it more gender sensitive in order to write the constitution. So I would like to hear any advice on for Syrian women, how to increase the participation of Syrian women in the constitutional process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go over there, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Antonia Sodono, and I'm the UN Women Rep for Côte d'Ivoire. The question that I have is, as you know, we are all at a crossroad right now. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is being tested, but also global security. It is an opportunity, it's terrible to say it like that, but to operationalize the Women and Peace and Security agenda. We have this opportunity to really make it concrete. What I see is that maybe we need to strengthen, increase broaden the alliance with women in politics, but also with women in foreign policy. And those women that are actually at the table in the bigger negotiation, in the global negotiations. And here, I mean, I base that on the fact that decision to go to war is far too serious to just be left to women. So what to men, sorry. What I would like to bring here to our reflection is how do we, sorry about the word for lack of another, use the current global context to step up, to really push for a effective women peace and security agenda. And I feel that if we are being tested right now, and if we do not rise to that challenge, we'll continue being in a narrative on the women peace and security. So this is what I wanted to share. The other point I wanted to make is that in West Africa, we are seeing countries overtaken by coup. And what we have seen is that there has been a fracture between civil society and government and parliament. And we have seen parliament being captured by government who have themselves done unconstitutional coups. Sorry, constitutional coup, between quotes. Coming here, the role of women to me is very important in holding them to account. And I feel that women have to really go deeper and work on governance issue as citizens, and not only limit ourselves to the women peace and security agenda, a women agenda, but also embrace this governance as a citizen to influence more. And but I'm sorry, I'm probably in a monologue here, but here it also it also raised the challenge of women as anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much.
As
Thank you very much. We have a few more questions just in front of you, please. For in the white jacket, if I can say this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. My apologies for arriving late because I arrived today from Boston, Harvard, because I'm a new admitted for the PhD candidate. My name is Haven. I'm from Eritrea, and I was a former political officer in the African Union Commission and the Department of Peace and Security and Political Affairs. I have two suggestions and one question to Ms. Linda Robinson.
I'm really sorry, we don't have much time, so if you can take it super short, because we'd love to answer the other questions. If you don't, sorry about this.
Okay. Okay, I'll proceed to the question. You've raised it, the US government have taken a unilateral sanctions against for those who commit sexual violence on the ongoing conflict in Sudan, but taken as vis-a-vis with what's going on in the global security, the unilateral sanctions doesn't brought the peace that we want. So what other measures with the ongoing political discourse shall we introduce in preventing the sexual violence on conflicts? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for pointing out who the question is directed to. So let's just take a brief round in answering those questions and see if there's time for more questions. There was the question from Syria about the Constitutional Assembly, and Mary Lou, in her life before becoming a senator, she's a constitutional lawyer and said that she could have an answer to that.
Thank you. It'll be a quick answer. Let me just add an adjective. I'm a feminist human rights lawyer, and there's excellent research on constitutional activism post-conflict. We can talk, but in a nutshell, one of the single most effective things to try to do when building a new constitution after conflict is get reference to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and to the Security Council Resolution 1325. And even if it's one short reference to incorporating international standards, bringing it into domestic law, bringing it into the Constitution, that can make a huge difference.
Thank you, Marie-Lou. Moving on to the questions that came from the special representative to Côte d'Ivoire. So on the coups in West Africa and the role of women, I wonder if maybe Ulmo, if you would be comfortable in answering that from an East African perspective on West Africa, but also probably the question is, are those coups, you know, constrained to some geographies only? So what discussion is going on and what preventative measures maybe are also taken in other countries? So what would your view from across the kind of more in the West, from East Africa to West Africa?
I think I can comfortably say for East Africa, we haven't had any coup yet. And it's it's an interesting thing to talk about, because a lot of East Africans are actually pushing for a coup and are hinting that, you know, some countries are long overdue. I would mention names, but I think it comes down to, and I kind of agree with her, that there's a gap in terms of the civil society and the governments. If at least, because coups come from, it's just like a ticking time bomb where democracy has been ignored, where the people's rights have been ignored and nobody is talking to each other rather than just dictating, then, you know, situations like that are bound to happen. And the history of countries that have had coups, where you would see, you know, constitutions are not actually being respected, or the democracy is often ignored. So these are things that national dialogues can actually be able to help or to support in countries that are, you know, going through such challenges. Case in point is when you listen to some of the West Africans, and they would tell you, you know, we are actually happy that this is happening. And those are just disgruntled people who just, you know, couldn't find another alternative. So the military then takes advantage. So well, for me, I think it goes beyond just the civil society, honestly, but just a discussion on democracy. And that's where the support of programs like this come in, educating the public.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry to be so rudely intervening. We are very short for time and have another question to answer and another intervention. Thank you so very much for providing your perspective. There was a direct question to Linda on the sanctions, and are there other ways to also go about this?
Yes, of course. Thank you. It's a great point that you make. And I would like to just say the use of sanctions in a unilateral way, the point I was trying to make is it's been expanded for the first time to address conflict-related sexual violence, which normally sanctions in the U.S. has been criticized widely for you going to the sanctions toolbox, if you will, to try to use its influence and power of the purse. But I think it's important contextually to say there are multilateral sanctions, there's conditionality of multilateral assistance. There's, of course, at the high end of action, the International Criminal Court, right, for war crimes that would include these kinds of gender-based crimes. And ultimately, and I think this is relevant to the rash of coups that are afflicting many countries in the Sahel region, when there is no partner to mediate with, you cannot just stand by. And so I think there is a need for always an open door to mediate and negotiate in conflicts. But when crimes are being committed and people are dying, there needs to be that punitive toolbox as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. So we are coming to the close of our session. And I would like to just bring in Paddy Torsney, who is the permanent observer to the United Nations of the Office of the Interparliamentary Union, which of course is like the UN of Parliaments. And please, over to you for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for inviting me here. I am representing the IPU, but I have to tell you, I'm also a former parliamentarian who worked on some unpopular issues with great CSO organizations across the country. And internationally, I worked on gun control, not always popular, and landmines. And so when I'm listening to all of you, I feel all this energy, and I think that's what CSOs also bring to all of these issues. The IPU has some really important handbooks. If you go to ipu.org, you can look under knowledge, and we have handbooks on this issue of the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Violence, discrimination against women, but also on eliminating gender-based violence toward women parliamentarians. So there are tools, there are studies, we're doing the research, we're gathering the data that all of you have access to use to propel these issues forward. I think it's a real opportunity. A member of parliament in any country represents a certain constituency, but by using the CSO network, they can expand their breadth. They can help popularize the issues. One individual MP can't get a law passed, but when she's working with somebody in 5 other cities or towns or in rural communities, and those people are going to their member of parliament and saying, I want action, those members of parliament say, I could be an ally to her or him. I need to get action on this, or this is going to be an election issue. So CSOs ask questions during election debates. Elections matter. Put these issues on the agenda. And CSOs there were talk about resources that people have. You have networks, you have fast research, you have things that, the patriarchy, as Mary Lou would say, or the traditional systems can't withstand the force of all that energy and the ways around. And by working with older, seasoned campaigners, that can give you, you can give them energy, but they can also give you their experience and their wisdom. Lastly, these national action plans provide a tool. The governments are signing things over here at the UN. They have an obligation to implement them. Use those tools, demand parliamentary input, demand parliamentary scrutiny, demand the laws and the budgets that implement them, and help popularize why things are happening. Why do we have to pass these laws? You're only going to get the support for them if you have the public understanding them. Otherwise, you slip back, as in this country and many other countries, on things that are important to women, and I would argue to all of society. Two last points. CSOs are a great source of future parliamentarians and future diplomats, and both with parliaments and our data, the IPU is now working on a motion in one of our next assembly to find out how parliaments are going to advance women ambassadors in the GA. Again, 24%, not good enough. We have to do better. So we're going to pass a motion on that, hopefully. And all of you, call your member of parliament. Tell them when they're doing a good thing. Tell them when they're doing a bad thing. If you call when they're doing a good thing, they'll listen to you twice when you're calling on a bad thing. But they're not mind readers. You have to stay engaged. It's not good enough to just vote every 4 years or 2 years. You got to stay engaged. You got to keep them in your sights and help them do the things you want to do. And I think this session is fabulous, and I thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Patty. I couldn't think of a more perfect closing to this session. And let me again also pick up on the point, be the echo chamber for positive feedback and criticism. We talk a lot about accountability, and that's extremely important. But it also makes a huge difference if parliamentarians hear when they're doing something well and see that this is also taken into account. So I just want to finally close by a round of massive thank yous. Thank you to all of you for coming, for being part of the session online. Thank you for staying with us and for participating also on the chat in this conversation. Thank you to the co-host, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders and UN Women. And thank you to our fabulous speakers. Those that are sitting here, those that are online. And again, this is just the beginning, not the beginning, it's a continuation of a conversation that many of you are having day in, day out. And it's bringing it to the environment of the UN General Assembly. And we will not stop here, of course not. And this collaboration and this collective action is something that we need to work on going future. So please, whatever you think as essence of wisdom comes from the session, take it with you, spread it. It's a gift that gets bigger by sharing. And have a great week. And hopefully by 2030, we'll have reached those heights that we wanted to see. Thank you.